The Persian Gulf lay shrouded in pre-dawn darkness at 0241 hours when 4 Iranian Mi-17 helicopters broke radio silence. Their transmissions crackled across emergency frequencies with urgent Mayday calls, declaring catastrophic engine failures and requesting immediate permission for emergency landing. The voices carried the unmistakable stress of pilots facing imminent disaster, their coordinates placing them dangerously close to the USS Abraham Lincoln's position. For the carrier's air traffic controllers, the situation presented an immediate humanitarian crisis. 4 aircraft with crews in peril, operating in international waters where maritime law demanded assistance to those in distress. What no one aboard the Lincoln knew was that beneath the dark waters directly below their hull, 2 Iranian Ghadir-class mini-submarines had already maneuvered into position. Their passive sonar operators listened to the carrier's propellers churning overhead, counting down the minutes until the helicopters would provide the distraction their mission required. Inside each cramped submarine, 15 commandos from the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy Special Forces performed final equipment checks, their breathing apparatus tested and retested, their weapons wrapped in waterproof sheaths. The coordination between air and subsurface elements represented months of planning, a carefully orchestrated deception designed to deliver 90 elite fighters onto America's most powerful warship. The submarines had departed from Bandar Abbas 72 hours earlier, taking circuitous routes through Gulf waters to avoid detection. These vessels, measuring just 29 meters in length, carried sophisticated sonar suppression technology, specifically designed for operations in shallow coastal waters. Their mission required positioning beneath the Lincoln without triggering the carrier's advanced sonar arrays. The submarines would serve multiple critical functions, inserting the underwater assault teams, providing covering fire supported if possible, and serving as extraction vehicles if the operation succeeded. The Combat Information Center aboard the Lincoln analyzed the Mayday transmissions with professional urgency. Radar returns confirmed 4 helicopters approaching from Iranian airspace, their flight profiles showing the erratic patterns consistent with aircraft experiencing mechanical emergencies. The duty officer faced a split-second decision: deny the landing request and potentially watch aircraft crash into the Gulf, or permit what could be an elaborate ruse. International maritime tradition and American naval doctrine emphasized assistance to mariners in distress. The helicopters received clearance to approach for emergency landing on the carrier's massive flight deck. Flight deck personnel scrambled to clear landing spots and position emergency response teams. Firefighting equipment rolled into position. Medical corpsmen stood ready with stretchers and trauma kits. The deck transformed into an emergency receiving area. Standard security protocols for foreign aircraft remained in place, but the urgency of the situation compressed normal verification procedures. The helicopters approached in formation, their navigation lights visible against the darkness, their distress calls continuing to paint a picture of desperate crews fighting failing machines. Beneath the surface, the submarine commanders received the signal that the helicopters had begun their final approach. Compressed air hissed through ballast systems as the vessels rose slowly toward the surface, maintaining just enough depth to avoid visual detection while allowing their commandos to exit. The first submarine positioned itself along the Lincoln's starboard side, the second to port, ensuring the assault would strike from multiple vectors simultaneously. Hatches opened silently underwater, and the commandos began their egress. At 0247 hours, the first Mi-17 crossed the deck perimeter, its engines roaring as the pilot executed what appeared to be a struggling approach. The second, third and fourth helicopters followed in rapid succession, spacing themselves across the vast flight deck. Then, in perfect synchronization, the performance ended. All 4 aircraft executed aggressive flares simultaneously, their failing engines suddenly producing full power. Side doors flew open and fast ropes deployed in a cascade of braided nylon. Commandos appeared in the doorways, already clipped to the ropes, beginning their rapid descent before most observers could process what was happening. The same moment the helicopters revealed their true intent, 30 commandos from the submarines kicked upward through the dark water. Their rebreathers functioning silently, they reached the Lincoln's hull and began ascending the carrier's side using magnetic climbing equipment. The specialized gear allowed them to scale the vertical surface despite wearing full combat loads. The submarines remained at depth, their crews monitoring through passive sonar, prepared to surface for extraction if the tactical situation allowed.
On the flight deck, the Iranian aerial assault teams hit the deck running. 60 commandos materialized across the carrier's topside within seconds. They moved with immediate purpose toward predetermined objectives. Some teams sprinted toward the parked FA-18 Super Hornets, carrying demolition charges designed to destroy aircraft worth over $70 million each. Others rushed the island superstructure, attempting to reach command spaces. A third element moved to secure access points to the hangar deck below. The Marine Security Force Quick Reaction Force responded within 90 seconds, but those 90 seconds allowed the Iranian Commandos to establish positions and begin their attack sequence. The first exchange of gunfire erupted near a cluster of parked aircraft, the sharp crack of rifle rounds echoing across the flight deck. The Marines advanced in tactical formation, using parked aircraft and deck equipment for cover, their training emphasizing fire discipline to avoid hitting critical systems or friendly forces in the confused environment. The underwater teams reached flight deck level at precisely 0249, emerging onto maintenance sponsons and external catwalks. Their appearance from an entirely unexpected vector created immediate tactical confusion. American personnel suddenly faced threats from multiple directions simultaneously, exactly as Iranian planners had intended. The subsurface teams quickly shed their waterproof equipment, bringing their weapons into action. Their positions along the hull gave them angles into the flight deck that the defenders hadn't anticipated. Intense combat erupted across the Lincoln's topside. Iranian commandos used the parked Super Hornets as fortified positions, firing from behind landing gear and beneath fuselages. They deployed smoke grenades that billowed across the deck, obscuring sight lines and creating confusion. Several teams reached aircraft and began placing explosive charges, working with urgent speed while their comrades provided covering fire. The distinctive sound of breaching charges detonating mixed with sustained gunfire as the battle intensified. Below the waterline, the submarine commanders faced an agonizing tactical dilemma. Their passive sonar detected the sounds of intense combat transmitted through the water and the carrier's hull structure. The original plan called for the submarines to surface alongside the carrier if the assault teams achieved their primary objectives, using deck-mounted weapons to suppress American response and recover personnel. But the acoustic signature suggested the operation was not proceeding as planned. Surfacing now would expose the submarines to devastating fire, almost certainly resulting in their loss with no benefit to the surface teams. American forces poured onto the flight deck from multiple access points. Navy masters-at-arms joined the Marines, establishing defensive lines and working to isolate the attackers. The ship's crew demonstrated remarkable fire discipline despite the extreme circumstances. Officers shouted commands over the gunfire, coordinating movements and establishing fields of fire.
The defenders quickly recognized the threat from the sponsons and catwalks, redirecting forces to engage the underwater insertion teams. Inside the island superstructure, Iranian commandos who had penetrated interior spaces found themselves in brutal close-quarters combat. The narrow passageways created an extremely challenging environment, where engagements occurred at ranges measured in feet. American personnel, many roused from sleep by the general quarters alarm, grabbed weapons and moved to defensive positions. Damage control teams found themselves simultaneously engaging intruders and managing small fires started by explosive devices. The helicopters, their insertion complete, attempted to provide fire support for the ground teams. Door gunners opened up with mounted machine guns, raking American positions. But this exposed the helicopter to concentrated return fire from dozens of small arms. Rounds tore through helicopter fuselages, shattering cockpit glass and disabling flight systems. One Mi-17 took catastrophic damage to its main rotor assembly, the aircraft lurching violently. A second helicopter, its fuel tanks perforated, began trailing smoke as aviation fuel ignited. The submarine commanders monitored the deteriorating situation through their acoustic sensors. The sound profile indicated American forces were gaining the upper hand, with the frequency and intensity of Iranian weapons fire decreasing. The difficult decision crystallized: remain in position, hoping for a miraculous reversal, attempt a surface action that would almost certainly fail, or preserve the submarines and their crews while accepting the loss of the surface teams. The submarines could not assist without sacrificing themselves uselessly. On the flight deck, the tactical situation evolved with brutal rapidity. The Iranian commandos fought with the desperation of men who understood they were committed beyond any possibility of extraction. They employed sophisticated small unit tactics, with teams providing mutual support and executing coordinated movements. But they faced overwhelming numbers and defenders who knew every inch of their ship. American forces began compressing the attackers into smaller areas, methodically clearing sectors of the massive deck.
At 0253, 6 minutes into the engagement, the first Iranian demolition charges detonated. An FA-18 erupted in flames as explosives severed critical structural members. The blast wave knocked nearby personnel off their feet, and secondary explosions from the aircraft's remaining fuel created a fireball that illuminated the entire flight deck. 2 more aircraft took explosive damage as commandos successfully completed their sabotage missions before being stopped. Each detonation represented tens of millions of dollars in destroyed capability. The underwater teams, fighting from their positions along the hull, found themselves increasingly isolated. American forces worked to seal access points from the sponsons to the flight deck, cutting off the subsurface commandos from mutual support with the aerial assault teams. The Iranian fighters realized their submarines could not surface to extract them without being destroyed. Several attempted to rappel back down to the water, hoping to swim to the submarines, but concentrated fire and exhaustion made this impossible. The submarines began their withdrawal at 0256, 10 minutes into the surface engagement. The commanders had no choice but to accept the mission's failure and preserve their vessels for future operations. The boats descended to 200 feet and turned away from the Lincoln, their electric motors running silent as they slipped away from the combat zone. Behind them, 30 of their commandos fought on without hope of extraction. The submarine crews would carry the weight of that abandonment, knowing operational necessity had demanded it. Inside the ship, the close-quarters battle reached fever pitch. Iranian commandos attempted to fight their way deeper into the carrier, seeking magazine access points that would allow catastrophic sabotage. American personnel established defensive positions at critical choke points, denying access to vital spaces.
Firefights erupted in mess decks, passageways, and maintenance spaces. By the 12-minute mark, American numerical superiority began telling decisively. Reinforcements continued flowing to contact points, while the Iranian forces could only diminish. Wounded commandos found no opportunity for medical treatment or evacuation. Ammunition began running low for teams that had carried only what they could fast rope with or swim with. The initial shock gave way to organized resistance that ground down the attackers through sheer weight of numbers and firepower. The helicopters faced their own crisis. 2 aircraft were already trailing smoke and fire, barely maintaining altitude. A third took concentrated fire that disabled its tail rotor, sending the Mi-17 into an uncontrollable spin. The pilot fought the controls desperately before the helicopter impacted the water 300 yards from the Lincoln, breaking apart on contact. The remaining airworthy aircraft abandoned the surface teams, turning toward Iranian territory with wounded crew aboard. At 15 minutes, the last organized Iranian resistance on the flight deck collapsed. Small groups of commandos continued fighting, but these represented isolated pockets rather than coordinated elements. American forces moved through the engagement areas with tactical precision, clearing behind aircraft and equipment, securing surrendering personnel, and neutralizing those who continued fighting. Medical teams began treating casualties from both sides. The underwater teams met their end in a final stand on the sponsons and catwalks. Cut off from extraction and facing overwhelming force, they fought from their exposed positions until American forces brought sufficient firepower to bear. Some attempted to jump back into the water, but wounded and exhausted, they could not swim to safety, even if the submarines had remained. At 0304, 23 minutes after the first helicopters touched down, the last gunshot echoed across the Lincoln's deck. The silence that followed seemed impossibly loud after the sustained violence. Smoke drifted across the flight deck from burning aircraft and scattered fires. Spent brass casings littered the deck by the thousands. Medical teams moved urgently across the deck, providing care to wounded personnel from both sides. The final accounting revealed the engagement's devastating outcome. All 90 Iranian commandos who landed on or climbed onto the Lincoln were either lost in action or captured. Of the 4 helicopters, 2 were destroyed in flight, 1 went down with complete crew losses, and only 1 returned to Iranian territory. The 2 mini-submarines escaped, their crews carrying the burden of abandoning their comrades but preserving critical assets. American casualties numbered 14 personnel lost and 38 wounded. 3 Fa-18 Super Hornets were destroyed completely, with 4 more requiring extensive repair work. Flight deck systems sustained damage requiring months of repair work. The operation demonstrated both audacious Iranian planning and the fundamental challenges of asymmetric naval warfare. The coordinated deception, the dual-axis assault, and the commandos' fighting spirit showed sophisticated operational thinking. The submarines successfully inserted their teams and escaped detection during withdrawal. Yet tactical surprise could not overcome the Lincoln's inherent advantages in numbers, firepower, and defensive depth. Regional tensions intensified immediately as additional American carriers deployed forward, while Iran absorbed significant special operations losses and faced questions about operational planning that had sent elite forces on a mission with minimal extraction options and overwhelming odds for success.